The coffee in Meridian Outpost's research lab tasted like despair, filtered through recycled water and synthetic caffeine substitute, which was accurate since that's exactly what it was. Doctor. Nathan Rivers contemplated this philosophical tragedy while staring at genetic sequence data that had stopped making sense approximately 3 hours ago when his brain officially gave up on basic cognitive function. He'd been awake for roughly 22 of the last 26 hours. Before that, he'd averaged maybe 4 hours of sleep per night for the past week. The critical phase of their genetic adaptation study had required constant monitoring, and as the junior researcher on the project, Nathan got the overnight shifts while his Velesian colleague Solara handled the day rotations. Speaking of whom, Nathan, are you actually processing this data or simply staring at the screen while your consciousness departs? Solara's voice cut through his caffeinated haze, and he jerked upright in his chair. She was standing beside his workstation now. When had she gotten there? Nathan's exhausted brain struggled to catch up with present reality. Solara was tall even by Velesian standards, maybe 6'2", with that characteristic elegant build her species was known for. Her skin was currently shifting through soft silver and pale blue tones, which he'd learned over 6 months meant she was in a good mood, focused and content with her work. Velesians were objectively beautiful by almost any species' aesthetic standards, and Solara was particularly striking even among her own people. Her skin's iridescence caught the lab's lighting in ways that human skin never could, subtle color shifts responding to her emotional state in real time. Her eyes were large and expressive, deep violet with no visible pupils, and her features had that elegant symmetry that human aesthetic processing found compelling for reasons Nathan could probably trace back to evolutionary psychology if his brain was functioning. Which it wasn't. Nathan. She tilted her head slightly, that gesture she did when she was waiting for response, when she was curious or confused or both. I'm processing, he lied, blinking hard and trying to focus on the genetic sequences displayed on his screen instead of on the way the light caught her skin when she moved. Solara leaned over his workstation to point at something on the display, and that's when Nathan's exhausted brain made a catastrophic decision. It output his internal monologue directly to his mouth, without passing through any kind of quality control whatsoever. Your body is absolutely incredible from an evolutionary perspective, he heard himself say, staring at her arm as her iridescent skin shifted colors in the changing light. The way your dermal chromophores respond to neural signals is fascinating, and the structural efficiency of your musculature allows for fluid movement without the bulk that human musculature requires. The proportions are mathematically harmonious in ways that human aesthetic processing reads as compelling, which makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint regarding mate selection, and his brain caught up with his mouth, approximately 15 seconds too late. Horror crashed over him like a tidal wave of ice water. He'd just been vocally admiring his colleague's body, while she was standing right there, in explicit detail, for 15 seconds that felt like 15 years. Solara had straightened up. Her skin was doing complicated things, rapid flashes from silver to purple to something almost pink, colors he didn't have solid reference for yet despite 6 months of working together. Her large violet eyes were fixed on him with an intensity that activated every prey response his species had evolved over millions of years. I mean from a purely scientific standpoint, Nathan added desperately, as if that made it better, as if there was any way to walk back vocally cataloging your colleague's physical features in extensive detail. Academic observation about evolutionary adaptations and phenotypic expression, not anything personal or inappropriate or suggesting any kind of, I'm going to stop talking now. He did not stop talking. His exhausted brain, having apparently decided that the solution to accidentally vocalizing attraction disguised as scientific interest was to explain in even more extensive detail exactly what evolutionary features he found compelling, continued its betrayal of basic social competence. The way Velesian bone structure creates those facial proportions is remarkable from an anatomical perspective, and the chromophore networks in your skin are more sophisticated than any human pigmentation system, and the efficiency of your species' movement patterns suggests neuromuscular optimization that. Nathan. Solara's voice cut through his verbal catastrophe. Her skin was still doing those rapid color shifts, cycling through shades he couldn't interpret. Are you aware that you are speaking aloud? Yes, I'm aware. My verbal filter has apparently ceased all operations due to catastrophic sleep deprivation and caffeine toxicity. I'm very sorry. This is completely inappropriate, and I will be filing my resignation immediately and possibly launching myself out the nearest airlock to avoid the awkwardness. Silence filled the lab. Nathan wanted the floor to open up and swallow him into the vacuum of space. He just destroyed the most important professional relationship he'd ever had, probably violated several workplace protocols, and definitely made his colleague incredibly uncomfortable by being that guy who couldn't keep his observations about her body to himself. Solara's skin was still shifting through colors: purple, pink, silver, back to purple. He had no idea what that meant, but it probably meant she was deciding between filing an official complaint and just stunning him with lab equipment. "You find my body interesting," she said finally, and it wasn't quite a question. "Scientifically," Nathan clarified weakly, "from an evolutionary biology and xenoanatomy perspective. I meant to think that internally, not vocalize it externally. My brain has apparently stopped distinguishing between internal monologue and external speech." "You said incredible," Solara corrected quietly, "not interesting. You said my body was absolutely incredible from an evolutionary perspective." Nathan wanted to die. "I misspoke. I meant to say, actually, I didn't mean to say anything. I meant to keep those observations entirely private and professional, and never vocalize them under any circumstances." Solara tilted her head again, studying him with those large violet eyes. Her skin had settled into a steady purple-pink now, less rapid shifting, more stable. "On my world, speaking admiration aloud is considered deeply honest. Velesians struggle to vocalize genuine appreciation. It requires overriding significant cultural conditioning. The fact that you spoke these thoughts without apparent conscious intention suggests very strong genuine feeling beneath your professional facade." Nathan's malfunctioning brain tried to process this. "So you're not offended?" "Offended?" Her skin shifted to deeper purple. "No. Surprised, yes. Curious, definitely. Velesian males rarely express admiration so directly, even when culturally appropriate to do so. Human males apparently express it accidentally, when their cognitive filtering systems fail due to exhaustion." She moved slightly closer to his workstation, and Nathan was suddenly very aware of the empty lab, the late hour, the fact that they were alone, and he just admitted, accidentally but thoroughly, that he found her physically compelling. "Tell me more about these evolutionary features you find incredible," Solara said, and her tone was strange, not quite professional but not quite personal either. This was dangerous territory. Nathan knew this was dangerous territory. Every functioning neuron left in his exhausted brain was screaming that he should deflect, should return to professionalism, should absolutely not elaborate on his observations about her body. His verbal filter, having already abandoned all pretense of functioning, disagreed entirely. "The chromophore networks in your skin aren't just pigmentation," he heard himself explaining, gesturing vaguely at her arm. "They're structural interference patterns at the microscopic level, which means the color shifts aren't just chemical changes, but actual physical reorganization of cellular architecture in response to neural signals. That's vastly more sophisticated than human melanin distribution. And the musculature, Velesian muscles have different fiber composition than human, which allows for that fluid movement without the bulk that human strength requires." It's efficiency optimization at the cellular level. He was still talking. Why was he still talking? And the proportions, the structural ratios, they fall into patterns that human aesthetic processing reads as harmonious, which makes sense from an evolutionary psychology perspective regarding mate selection and genetic fitness indicators, even cross-species, because certain ratios seem to trigger universal aesthetic responses across multiple sentient species, probably because they indicate health and genetic quality. And Nathan. Solara's skin was definitely pink now, steady and bright. These observations are very specific. You have thought about this considerably. I'm a xenobiologist, he defended weakly. I think about evolutionary adaptations professionally. It's literally my job to notice these things. Is it your job to think about my specific body's evolutionary features? She moved closer, sitting on the edge of his workstation. Or is that personal interest? Nathan had walked directly into a trap of his own exhausted making. I may have noticed certain features in a way that extends slightly beyond pure academic interest. Slightly. Okay, significantly. I've noticed significantly. But I've been completely professional about it until this moment, never said anything, never acted on it inappropriately. This was just a catastrophic verbal filter failure due to extreme sleep deprivation, and I am genuinely sorry if I've made you uncomfortable. Solara's skin was solid purple now, steady and deliberate, no longer shifting. Nathan, on my world, when someone admits attraction, even accidentally, the cultural protocol is to acknowledge it directly. Velesians do not engage in the elaborate pretense and denial that humans apparently prefer, so I will be direct with you now. Nathan's heart was doing complicated things in his chest. I have also noticed features about your body that I find compelling, Solara said, her voice quiet but clear. Human musculature is different from Velesian, more pronounced, more visible beneath the skin. Your species has fascinating variation in skin tones and textures that my species lacks. And human faces are remarkably expressive in ways ours are not. The movement of your features conveys emotion that we must display through chromophore shifts. Nathan's brain had completely stopped functioning now. I have found myself noticing these features in you specifically, Solara continued, her purple skin steady and intent. Watching the way your hands move when you work. Observing how your facial expressions shift with your emotional state. Analyzing the structural patterns of your features in ways that are not scientifically necessary for our research collaboration. You, Nathan managed eloquently. I assumed this was inappropriate cross-species interest that should be kept entirely private, Solara said. But if we are being accidentally honest due to your filter failure, then I will be intentionally honest in return. Yes, I find your body interesting. More than scientifically appropriate, I have been noticing you in ways that extend beyond our professional relationship. They stared at each other in the empty lab. The genetic sequence data on Nathan's screen continued scrolling, ignored. 6 months of careful professionalism had just shattered because Nathan's exhausted brain forgot how to keep thoughts internal. So Nathan managed finally, his voice rough. What happens now? Solara's skin shifted to that purple-pink again. That depends. Are you still too exhausted for your verbal filter to function properly? Probably yeah. I'm running on approximately 0 sleep, and my brain has given up on basic executive function. Why? She stood up from his workstation, moved closer to his chair. Her skin was cycling through deeper purple-pink shades now. Because I am curious what other thoughts you have been keeping filtered, and I think I would like to hear them, all of them, unfiltered. Nathan looked up at her, at the iridescent skin shifting colors with her emotions, at those large expressive eyes fixed on him with intent, at the elegant proportions his exhausted brain kept cataloging in ways that definitely weren't professional. That's dangerous, he said quietly. Perhaps, Solara agreed, but honest, and I think I prefer dangerous honesty to safe pretense. Nathan's verbal filter, having already destroyed his professional facade, decided to finish the job entirely. I think about you constantly. I notice every time you enter a room. I've memorized the colors your skin shifts through when you're focused on work versus when you're amused versus when you're frustrated. I watch your hands move when you're manipulating samples, and it's distracting in ways that have nothing to do with scientific methodology. You're the most fascinating person I've ever worked with, and somewhere in the past 6 months, that stopped being purely professional fascination and became something else entirely. Solara's skin flashed brilliant purple-pink, brighter than he'd ever seen. Continue. I want to know what your skin feels like up close. If it's as smooth as it looks, or if there's texture I can't see from here. I want to understand what makes your colors change beyond just the emotions I can guess at. I want to map the chromophore patterns and figure out exactly what neural pathways they're connected to, not for research, but just because I want to understand you that completely. He was vaguely aware he was saying too much, verbal filter completely destroyed, but Solara was smiling. He thought it was smiling. The expression didn't map perfectly to human faces, but the intent seemed similar. And her skin was doing beautiful things with color that his exhausted brain wanted to study forever. You may find out, she said quietly, and her voice had that strange tone again, somewhere between professional and personal and something else entirely. If you are brave enough to stop merely being honest and start acting on that honesty. The chapter ended, but Nathan's courage apparently didn't, because he stood up from his chair slowly, giving her time to back away, time to refuse, time to remember this was a terrible idea. She didn't back away. Over the next week, Nathan discovered that accidentally admitting attraction to your colleague had significant consequences for workplace dynamics. They continued their research. The genetic adaptation study didn't stop for personal revelations. The data still needed analysis. Samples still required processing. But now there was an undercurrent to every interaction, a tension that hadn't existed before, or maybe had always existed, but was now acknowledged instead of ignored. Solara had apparently decided that since honesty was on the table, she preferred it to stay there permanently. "What are you thinking right now?" she asked during a routine sample analysis, her skin cycling through curious silver tones. "That the protein folding patterns in this sample provide interesting insight into adaptive mechanisms," Nathan answered, carefully professional. "No." She moved closer to his microscope station. "What are you actually thinking?" Nathan sighed. His verbal filter had mostly recovered with sleep and reduced caffeine intake, but Solara seemed determined to prevent it from fully regenerating. "That you're standing close enough that I can see the individual chromophore patterns in your skin, and it's making it difficult to focus on the sample analysis," he admitted. "And that this is probably not appropriate workplace behavior." "Much better, honest." Her skin shifted to pleased purple-pink. "Continue doing that." This became their pattern. Solara would ask what he was actually thinking. Nathan, finding that verbal honesty was apparently what she wanted, would tell her. Her skin would do color shifts that he was slowly, painstakingly learning to interpret. Purple-pink meant pleased or attracted. Silver meant curious or interested. Deep blue meant she was processing something carefully. But the honesty wasn't one-sided. True to her promise about Velesian directness, Solara offered her own observations with a frankness that Nathan found simultaneously terrifying and compelling. "Human males have pronounced musculature in their forearms that becomes more visible during certain hand movements," she commented while they were calibrating equipment. "I have found myself watching your hands when you work. This is not scientifically necessary for our research, but I have continued to do it regardless." Nathan nearly dropped the calibration tool he was holding. "That's very Velesians do not engage in pretense once attraction is acknowledged. To do so would be dishonest." Her skin shifted to that purple-pink again. "Does this directness make you uncomfortable?" "Yes, also no. Also, I don't know how to process the information that you've been watching my hands." I have also been noticing other features. The way human facial hair grows in particular patterns, yours specifically. The movement of human musculature beneath skin during physical tasks. The variation in your skin tone across different body areas. These observations are not professionally necessary, but they are honest. They were playing a dangerous game, not violating any explicit workplace protocols. They were both still professional during official duties, still producing excellent research, still maintaining appropriate boundaries with other colleagues. But between them, privately, in late-night lab sessions when they were alone, the boundaries were significantly more blurred. The tension built over days. Nathan would catch Solara staring at him during data analysis, her skin that telltale purple-pink. She would catch him watching her move through the lab with that fluid Velesian grace that his brain kept cataloging in ways that definitely weren't scientific. Neither of them looked away when caught anymore. Solara had made it clear that pretense was dishonest, so they'd stopped pretending they weren't noticing each other. "This is unsustainable," Nathan said finally, during a late session when they were alone in the lab running overnight protein synthesis. "We're going to have to actually address this, instead of just acknowledging it indefinitely." Address how? Solara's skin flickered through several colors, uncertainty maybe, or anticipation, or both. "I don't know. Station protocols don't explicitly cover this situation. Human social conventions definitely don't cover this. I don't even know if Velesian and human compatibility is possible beyond just mutual appreciation of evolutionary features. There are documented cases of human-Velesian romantic relationships," Solara said carefully, her skin shifting to thoughtful blue. "They are statistically rare but not unprecedented. Physical compatibility exists, though cultural compatibility is more complex to navigate." Nathan processed this, sitting heavily on one of the lab stools. "You've researched this?" "Of course I researched this. Once I acknowledged my interest, even privately, I investigated whether it was possible to pursue. Did you not do the same?" "I tried very hard not to think about it at all, actually. Seemed safer than researching relationship compatibility with my colleague. Safer but less honest." She moved closer, and Nathan was acutely aware of the empty lab, the late hour, the way her skin was shifting through colors that he'd learned meant attraction and uncertainty and curiosity all mixed together. "I will be direct again, because that is what Velesians do. I want to pursue this. I want to understand if what exists between us is only acknowledged attraction, or if it could develop into something more substantial. But I will not pursue it if you are not equally interested and willing." "I'm not certain of anything," Nathan admitted, meeting those large violet eyes. "I'm not certain this is smart or allowed or will work long-term. But I know I think about you constantly in ways that stopped being professional months ago. I know you're the most fascinating person I've ever worked with. And I know that every time you ask me to be honest about what I'm thinking, it gets harder to remember why we're not already together." Solara's skin flashed bright purple-pink, more intense than he'd seen before, colors rippling across her visible skin in waves. "Then stop remembering those reasons. Stop being cautious. Be honest with me instead." "Honestly." Nathan stood up, and now they were close, closer than professional distance, close enough that he could see the microscopic patterns in her iridescent skin. "I want to know what your skin actually feels like. If it's as smooth as it appears, or if there's texture I can't see from a distance. I want to know what specific stimuli make your colors change, not just guessing from context. I want to know if Velesians engage in physical affection the same way humans do, or if it's completely different, and if different, whether that's something we could navigate together." He was talking too much again, verbal filter degraded by late hour and proximity, and 6 months of keeping these observations carefully internal. But Solara was smiling. He was more confident now that the expression meant smiling, had learned to read it in the subtle shifts of her features, and her skin was doing beautiful things with color. You may find out the answers, she said quietly, moving closer still, if you are brave enough to stop merely being honest about wanting and start actually pursuing what you want. Nathan looked at her, at the iridescent skin cycling through purple-pink invitation, at the large eyes fixed on him with intent, at the elegant features his exhausted brain had catalogued that first catastrophic night and hadn't stopped cataloging since. I'm brave enough, he said quietly, and closed the distance between them. Nathan's hand touched Solara's arm carefully, giving her every opportunity to pull away or refuse. Her skin was warm, warmer than human skin, he noted with the part of his brain that never stopped analyzing, and the texture was subtle but definitely there. Your skin does have texture, he said quietly, fingertips tracing the iridescent surface gently. Very fine, like microscopic scales but softer. I wouldn't have been able to tell from visual observation alone. Solara's skin brightened where he touched her, ripples of color spreading outward from the contact point like waves across water. Bright purple-pink spread up her arm, across her shoulder, colors moving beneath her skin in patterns he'd never seen before. Physical touch affects chromophore response directly, she explained, her voice slightly unsteady. What you are seeing is my body's physiological reaction to your contact at the cellular level. It is not consciously controlled. Is this okay? Nathan asked, still touching gently, watching the colors ripple. Am I doing this correctly? There is no singular correct approach. Velesians have different touch protocols than humans, but her skin rippled again as his fingers moved slightly. This is very much okay. They explored this new territory carefully. Nathan learned that Velesians experienced physical touch more intensely than humans. Their skin was sensory organ in ways his wasn't. Every contact sending information and color changes rippling across her body. What felt like gentle pressure to him registered as significant sensation to her. Solara, in turn, learned that humans needed more sustained contact, more pressure, that what felt intense to her barely registered as sensation to him. Her initial touches were too light, almost imperceptible, until Nathan guided her hands with more pressure and she adjusted. Your species is remarkably durable, she observed, her hands on his arms now, exploring the musculature she'd admitted to watching. I would concern myself with causing unintentional damage, but you seem constructed to withstand significant force. Humans are pretty robust compared to some species. You're not going to hurt me. That is relieving to know. Her hands moved to his face, fingers tracing features with scientific precision that somehow didn't feel clinical at all. Your bone structure is much more prominent than Velesian. Your features are very defined, very angular. I understand now why humans find our faces difficult to read. We have much less structural variation in our features. Your faces are expressive in different ways, Nathan countered, his own hands moving to her shoulders, feeling the efficient musculature beneath her skin. The eye movement, the skin color shifts. It's just a different language of expression. They were learning each other, not just physically but culturally, finding where human and Velesian approaches to intimacy overlapped and where they diverged completely. Solara was direct in ways that would have seemed almost clinical if not for her skin displaying emotions in real time, colors broadcasting what her words and Velesian features couldn't fully express. Nathan was more tentative, more verbal, asking constant permission in ways that initially confused her until she understood it came from fear of crossing boundaries, not lack of interest. Humans have very extensive protocols around physical intimacy, Solara observed, sitting close beside him now on the lab's small couch, ostensibly for breaks, rarely used. Rules about appropriate progression, timing, social implications. Velesians are much simpler in our approach. Attraction is acknowledged, compatibility is assessed, relationship is pursued or not. Your complexity is challenging to navigate. Your directness is challenging for me, Nathan admitted. Humans usually engage in very elaborate pretense before arriving at honesty. We have entire social rituals designed around not saying what we actually mean. But you prefer honesty, you have said so. I do prefer it, doesn't mean it's not terrifying. Solara's skin shifted to soft blue. He'd learned this meant amusement or gentle humor. Then be terrified honestly. Tell me what you fear. That this doesn't work long-term. That cross-species relationships fail for reasons we can't predict or prevent. That I'll disappoint you somehow, or you'll realize humans are boring compared to Velesians, or that station protocols will force us apart, or that I'm completely out of my depth here and have no idea what I'm doing. You are out of your depth, Solara agreed, her hand still on his face, skin cycling through purple-pink. I am also out of my depth. Neither of our species has extensive experience with this. But I find that I prefer being out of my depth with you to being certain and safe with anyone else. Nathan kissed her. It was awkward at first. Velesians didn't kiss exactly. The gesture didn't map perfectly to their expressions of physical affection. Their mouths weren't quite shaped the same way. But Solara adapted quickly, learning the pressure and movement, and her skin flashed brilliant colors in response. Bright purples and vibrant pinks swirling together in patterns that were probably the Velesian equivalent of human physiological arousal responses. When they separated, her skin was colors he'd never seen from her before, almost glowing with intensity. That is remarkably intense, she said, slightly breathless. Humans engage in this behavior casually. Some humans do. I don't usually. This isn't casual for me. Good, it is profoundly not casual for me either. They spent the rest of that night in the lab, not working on their research, not analyzing samples or processing data, just existing in proximity and learning each other's boundaries and preferences, and the thousand small ways that human and Velesian approaches to physical intimacy differed. By morning, they were going to have to address protocols and practicalities, and the reality of being the first human-Velesian relationship on the station. They would have to report it to command, navigate cultural differences more substantial than just different touch responses, figure out if what worked in private at night could survive in public during the day. But that was morning's problem. Right now, Nathan learned that Solara made this soft humming sound when she was content, that her skin stayed bright purple-pink when she was happy, that she found human body heat fascinating and kept her hands on him like he was a warmth source she didn't want to move away from. Right now, Solara learned that Nathan had a tendency to verbalize his observations when he was relaxed, that humans showed affection through constant small touches rather than single intense contacts, that his species had this fascinating vulnerability in how they expressed emotion that Velesians rarely displayed so openly. They talked through the night, about their research, about their worlds, about the complications ahead that neither could fully predict. Solara maintained her Velesian directness, asking questions that humans would consider far too personal. Nathan gradually shed his human inclination toward privacy and pretense, finding that complete honesty with her was easier than maintaining any kind of social facade. This all began with your verbal filter failing catastrophically, Solara said as artificial dawn approached, the lab's automated lighting systems gradually increasing. With you accidentally speaking thoughts you intended to keep completely private. Do you regret that failure now? Nathan looked at her, at the iridescent skin still cycling through content purple-pink, at the large eyes fixed on him with warmth and curiosity, at this person who'd responded to his embarrassing accident with honesty instead of offense. No, he said simply. I regret all the time before that failure. I regret filtering those thoughts for 6 months. I regret not speaking sooner, even if it would have been just as awkward and inappropriate. Her skin brightened, pleased. Humans would have called that inappropriate. Humans are wrong about a lot of things. Velesians are right about honesty. Then continue being honest with me, Solara said, moving closer. Always. Even when it is difficult or embarrassing, or reveals more than is comfortable. Even when my verbal filter fails and I say wildly inappropriate things. Especially then. Morning arrived properly, fully, the lab systems coming online and reminding them that the rest of the station would wake soon. They'd have to face protocols and procedures, navigate the complications of being the first human Velesian couple on Meridian Outpost, figure out how to maintain professional competence in shared workspace, while also maintaining this new personal relationship. But they would face it together. Nathan's verbal filter still somewhat compromised, Solara's directness absolutely uncompromising, both committed to the honesty that had started this. Weeks later, filing the required relationship disclosure paperwork with Station Command, Nathan would write in the section asking, "How did this relationship begin?" Catastrophic verbal filter failure due to sleep deprivation led to accidental honesty about mutual attraction, which turned out to be exactly what we both needed. Solara, reading over his shoulder, her skin bright purple-pink with approval, would say, "Accurate and appropriately honest. Very good. You're never going to let me fully restore my verbal filter, are you?" "Why would I want that? Your unfiltered honesty is my favorite thing about you. That and my fascinating human musculature." "That too, but primarily the honesty. Velesians value honesty above all other qualities. You provide it even when you don't intend to. This is very compatible with my cultural values." They submitted the paperwork together, publicly acknowledging what had begun with private thoughts accidentally spoken. Station Command approved it with some bewilderment. Cross-species relationships were rare but not prohibited, fell into gray areas of protocol that nobody had fully mapped yet. Their colleagues adjusted with varying degrees of surprise and curiosity. Some found it fascinating from a xenosociology perspective. Others were just happy that Nathan had stopped looking perpetually exhausted and Solara had stopped spending so much time alone in the lab. But Nathan and Solara barely noticed the external reactions. They were too busy continuing to learn each other, navigating the massive differences between human and Velesian approaches to relationship, while also discovering unexpected areas of compatibility. All because Nathan's sleep-deprived brain had failed to keep his observations about her incredible evolutionary features internal, and Solara had decided that accidental honesty was more valuable than professional pretense. Sometimes the best relationships began with the worst mistakes, or what seemed like mistakes until you realized they were exactly what needed to happen. Nathan's exhausted brain, accidentally outputting his internal analysis of Solara's body, had felt like professional suicide in the moment. Instead, it had opened a door to something neither of them expected but both of them needed. Honest, complicated, cross-species, and absolutely worth every awkward moment that got them there.